Welcome to this lovely Wednesday where we're going to deep dive into mobile accessibility. We have talked a lot about web accessibility and how to make your website accessible. And now it's time to feel what it means your website to be also mobile accessible. So we're going to deep dive in the must 2023 digital tool that you need to focus on. And I'm just going to talk a little bit the housekeeping rules with what we usually have as the live transcription is already available. You probably have it popping down on your screen over here. But if you want to keep us following the sound, you can just also remove them. The recording later on will be also sent over to your email. Just give us like a few days to edit the captions so we know that they are correct and the pronunciations of the terminology is correctly spelled. We'll also encourage you, just like you use the chat to mention where you're coming from and how you're doing, just to keep that chat alive during the webinar and ask your questions. We will keep the answers for the end of the webinar, but however, it will be nice if you are tickling your questions meanwhile. So a quick intro. My name is Graciela, as Jasmine mentioned. My name is Graciela Zhelova, and I'm coming from the Monsido's Copenhagen office. I'm working as a revenue marketing manager, and I have been with Monsido for, it's going to be a year in April, studying and still learning about accessibility and preaching that to all our audience. And maybe Jasmine can introduce herself.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Jasmine de Guzman. I'm the Director of International Marketing here at Monsido, powered by Civic Plus. I have a background in the website space, and I've really just been seeing the evolution towards mobile and the mobile experience. So really excited to discuss accessibility and mobile accessibility with you guys here today. And James, you want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, cheers, Jasmine. Yeah, my name's James Williams, and I'm an account executive here at Monsido. I've been working closely with customers over many years, assisting them with improving the accessibility of their domain, specifically mobile accessibility. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to sharing some insights in today's session.
All right. And maybe here Jasmine can do a little intro of what Monsido is and what are we doing on an everyday basis.
Exactly, I'd be happy to. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Monsido, what our platform does is it scans the website and helps you find any issues and errors, whether it be misspellings or broken links. But we also look at accessibility, of course, and we work with a bunch of different organizations across Europe. So these are just a couple of the different people that we work with, and we've got a couple of case studies here as well when we distribute the slides afterwards. But let's jump into the meat of the presentation.
So today we're gonna focus a little bit on what is mobile accessibility and what do we see our clients and prospects talking about when it comes to talk about mobile accessibility. Also, why it should be an important thing that you include in your planning in 2023 in your website optimization. Why it should be something that you should not miss talking and discussing within your team. Also, what are the mobile, why it matters on a daily basis, and why it matters for your business, and why it matters for your website and your website visitors. What is the impact of mobile accessibility measured? And of course, some practical tips and resources of how to implement it, more useful examples of what we have seen our customers and prospects talking about. And in the end, we're going to wrap up with all your questions that you have. So let's jump right into it with a little quick poll, which I would ask Jasmine to pull because my Zoom instruments disappeared.
No worries. I just launched the poll. And
so, we are just to understand what the crowd is and what do you know about website accessibility. Have you started working on your desktop versions? Have you probably like it's an ongoing process, of course. It's not something that you quick fix for once. And we see a lot of the people have answered. We
Yes.
going to share also the poll results.
Sharing the results here.
All right. So most of you consider that you have improvements to do, and this is why we are here today, to show you how you can improve. And let's jump to the next one. And I think here Jasmine will take you deep dive into what is mobile accessibility and what do we mean by saying it, and what does the general industry means by talking about mobile accessibility.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Graziella. And I also just want to say a big thank you to those people, those 11% of people who said that they're not yet accessible. I want to applaud you and for taking the first step and joining our webinar, because the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to mobile accessibility is just understanding accessibility in general, because a lot of us know accessibility as making sure that, for example, physical buildings have a ramp so someone in a wheelchair can get in, those kinds of things. So digital accessibility is something that we've really seen grow a lot in the past 10 years, and it's making sure that everyone has equal access and participation when you're also accessing digital aspects. And that includes websites, it includes mobile websites, it includes mobile applications. And so this means essentially actively removing barriers. A good example of that is, for example, an individual who is blind should just as easily be able to receive information from an image as we do. And that means putting alt text on the image. So actively removing that barrier so that everyone can partake in digital services, the websites, and the mobile world today. And if we just jump to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So website accessibility really comes down to a couple of different things. There is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. You'll often hear them called VCAG or WCAG. And these are kind of international standards for what website accessibility entails. Obviously, in the past 10, 15 years, we've seen a huge push towards mobile. And this is also something that's been reflected in these guidelines, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But the other thing when it comes to website and mobile website accessibility is that there is, of course, legislation that is coming about, and there's a couple of different ones that, and the important thing with this legislation and these regulations is that they're not setting the level of website accessibility themselves. They are referring to these international guidelines. And the guidelines are the ones that are setting the standard as to how accessible your website and your mobile website need to be. So for example, in the EU, we have the EU Web Accessibility Directive, which references WCAG 2.1. The UK also has the Public Sector's Body Act of Website and Mobile Applications, I believe is what it's called. They're both referencing WCAG 2.1, and they are pertaining specifically to public sector organizations in Europe and the United Kingdom. We also expect for private companies that accessibility and mobile accessibility is something that is going to continue to increase importance. And this is specifically in relation to the European Accessibility Act that we expect to come soon. And the interesting thing with the European Accessibility Act is that we expect it to reference an even newer version of the WCAG. There is version 2.2 coming soon and 3.0 in the works. So when the European Accessibility Act is introduced, mobile accessibility will almost 100% on a lot of different aspects be included. So jumping into what mobile accessibility and what we exactly mean about that. Well, I mentioned a couple times, it's essentially making sure that the mobile version of your website is accessible. And there's a couple of different criteria that already exist around that. And so that's a great example of that is a new success criteria that was introduced in WCAG 2.1. It is 134 in orientation, and it talks specifically about the fact that people shouldn't have to rotate their mobile device to be able to access your website. They need to be able to access it even without that. And that is really what we're talking about, is proactively removing those barriers. A couple of the other things that are coming in WCAG 2.2 is something that I know my own grandfather struggles with because he has a neurological condition, and it is that buttons are often too small on mobile devices. And even us without neurological conditions, sometimes the buttons are so tiny, so it's incredibly frustrating. And then there's also things like dragging movements, which might be difficult for someone with Parkinson's. So mobile accessibility is all about making sure that the mobile user experience is equal and as accessible for everyone, whether you are using a mobile phone or a tablet, or if you're using some kind of assistive technology to access the website. And I'm going to hand it off to James now, who's going to talk a little bit more why it's so important to have on your radar this year.
Cheers, Jasmine. Yeah, so basically I want to talk about the mobile experience. So nearly 60% of all website traffic comes from mobile devices, right? So I know what I'm like, always on my phone. It's attached to my hand most of the time, so I'll be most likely browsing the internet via my mobile device. And I'm sure there'll be many on this call that would also agree that it's quite a similar situation to themselves, right? In my regular conversations with prospects, right? So I don't hear them talking a lot at all about mobile accessibility. I don't hear them asking many questions about it either. So I do actually feel like most people and businesses are missing a trick, definitely missing a trick here, because it is something that is massively important to the overall accessibility compliance of your domain. And the stats here show how important it should be, right? 50% of smartphone users are more likely to use a company or brand's mobile site when browsing or shopping on a smartphone because they don't want to download an app, right? Again, the amount of times we've all had limited signal or limited data, so it's just 10 times easier, right, for us to just open up the website on our phone rather than sit there and download an app. I've gone to Google Lighthouse and accessibility now. So yeah, Google Lighthouse tool does not only evaluate website performance, it also looks at accessibility. So now at the end of the day, this can impact your SEO, search engine optimization rankings. So in combination with Google's mobile first indexing, mobile accessibility should definitely be front of mind for your 2023 website optimizations. So again, just another sort of short story there, really, when I'm speaking to a lot of our prospects and when I'm demonstrating the Monsido platform, I often tell them about the link between SEO and accessibility, and a lot of them are just totally unaware that these are linked. I would honestly say that 9 times out of 10 or nine times out of 10 people who I speak to, they don't actually realize that mobile accessibility and accessibility is linked to SEO. So yeah, just to recap there, accessibility is a major part of SEO, and mobile accessibility is a huge part of your overall compliance level, and therefore will increase your SEO ranking. And why should it be on your radar? So just a few reasons here. I mean, we probably could have picked a few more, but we've just, we've really just pinpointed a few just for today's session here. But it can expand your reach. So you do not want to be letting businesses walk out the door, right? So again, the amount of times I'm speaking to businesses and telling them that ultimately they will lose out on website traffic and therefore revenue in the long run if their website is not mobile friendly. I mean, of course, what's going to happen is if you're a user and you need certain accessibility measures set, and that website that you go to doesn't have that accessibility measure set or those accessibility measures set, then they're just going to go elsewhere, right? They're just going to press the red button and they're just going to go to another website that has the accessibility that they need. It creates a better user experience. It can improve SEO, as I said just a few moments before, and inclusion as well, right? It makes your organization more inclusive. So of course, inclusion is extremely important in all walks of life and business, of course. So don't fall short on having your HTML pages and documents accessible, but not your mobile site. So that does lead me into my next point. When speaking to businesses, keeping HTML pages and documents accessible is usually at the top of their list, and mobile accessibility either gets overlooked, hasn't been talked about, or is at the bottom of the list. This really shouldn't be the case. Mobile accessibility is just as important as keeping your HTML pages and documents accessible. It's the law, so we are going to be touching on that just in a few moments, and of course the last one there, it's the right thing to do. So I'm going to hand back to Jasmine now, who will speak about her own experience with mobile accessibility problems.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks so much, James. And I think you make a really good point about documents, because I know when I started at Monsido, I had no clue that uploading documents onto your website also constitutes website content, and therefore that needs to be accessible. So if that's not something that you're aware of yet, accessibility of your desktop, accessibility of your documents online, and accessibility of your mobile site. Those are 3 different areas that you really need to think about. But why it matters to your visitors, I'm actually going to share a little bit of a personal story with you guys here, because if we hop to the next slide, you guys are going to see me right around this time last year, where I actually had a temporary disability. And what that meant was I actually had an inflammation of the middle layer of my eye, which meant my eyes were incredibly sensitive to light. My vision was limited on my left eye, and I had to essentially enlarge all the fonts on my laptop, on my phone, and able to do any work. And so I was incredibly happy that I knew about accessibility. So I went into my phone. There's a mobile accessibility option in iPhone, so that I could enlarge text. I enlarged text on my computer as well. And I had a couple of colleagues come over and be quite shocked at how large everything was. But the other thing I realized in enabling these accessibility features on my mobile phone was how terrible the mobile experience was sometimes. And I have a couple of examples here of poor mobile user experience that I experienced myself personally. The first was in an app called Umbrella. And both of these are apps, so totally transparent about that. But a lot of these same principles apply to mobile websites. But I was at a conference and there was an app called Umbrella that we needed to download in order to connect with other attendees. And I was super excited. That's fantastic. But as I was downloading the app and I wanted to get into it, there was this quick update available. And I had to do the update to be able to get into the app. The only challenge was because I was using an enlarged font and the app was not responsive for this, I was not able to press the button. So it was incredibly frustrating. And you know what? The exact same thing could have happened on a website. I know this happens all the time, for example, with cookie consent banners on websites where they're enlarged, or if you have enlarged text, then it's very difficult to navigate on the mobile website. The other example I have as well is actually I was trying to log into Instagram, and there again, this is an application example, but the same principles would apply to forms on a mobile website. And I was trying to use this date picker to select some information. And because I was using the enlarged text, the form was layering over the text, meaning I was unable to actually save the information. So very frustrating. Instagram did not respond to my complaint. Umbrella actually very quickly did fix it. So really just goes to show that mobile accessibility is something that really can impact everyone. But beyond me and my temporary disability, if we do have a look at the next slide, accessibility is something that really impacts so many people around the world. And as James said, if you're not adapting and knowing that some of these people are coming in through mobile traffic, you're going to eventually lose out on engagement and revenue. So we have about 87 million people in the EU who have some form of disability. We also have an aging population in the European Union. So that's also someone who would often benefit from a lot of accessibility and mobile accessibility features and functionality. In the UK, we've got about 22% of the population, also an aging population. So it's also something to really keep in mind that, yes, it is something that can help for people who have permanent disabilities, for example, blind individuals who use screen readers. But it's also helpful for, as I mentioned before, elderly individuals who have a hard time pressing the button because they have reduced motor skills. And so the buttons cannot be too small on mobile devices and mobile design. Or individuals with neurological conditions like Parkinson's, where they're shaking, so it's difficult, as I mentioned before, to use sliders. Or even we're all working on computers all the time, and I know carpal tunnel syndrome is unfortunately on the rise. So people who have issues with pinched nerves in their wrists, that's also something important, that we're not making sure that we're forcing them to use too many movements to navigate your mobile website. So it benefits a lot more people than you think. And I know someone in here said making a site accessible often means making the user experience better for everyone. I couldn't agree more. And I'll hand it off to James to wrap it up of how to implement mobile accessibility.
Cheers, Jasmine. Thank you very much. So, I mean, there's 2 ways to do it, right? The first way is checking it manually, and there's there's going to be probably quite a few people on this call that know how to do that. There might be a few that don't know how to do that. So the first way of doing it, it's really simple, right? You could do it yourself. So all you need to do is just go to one of your web pages, right click a page on your website there, click inspect, and you can then easily change the view of your website to various mobile devices. So you can change that to iPhone 12, Samsung, of course, other mobiles are available. But yeah, so therefore what you're basically going to be doing there is you can actually see your website and see how it looks via a mobile device, but whilst you're on your desktop. That's really quite simple, right? But number two, and more importantly, you need to be using an automated tool, right? So this is just being extra safe. You should be using an automated tool in this sense, because what's going to be happening is you're being a lot more proactive rather than reactive. And then you can easily go into your CMS and correct the issues afterwards. If you're manually checking these, the first point that I've just made, it's literally just only a one-time only check, right? So you're only doing that once every week or every 2 months or something like that. We're basically saying to you, we'll automate that check for you. We're going to be consistently checking this for you. And websites and accessibility, it's ever changing. So having an automated tool, it's highly recommended. And then next point there is basically just telling you how we do it, right? So there's two specific checks that we use. Number one is pinch to zoom disabled. And again, I'm pretty sure a lot of us on this call have had issues in the past where you're trying to zoom into something on your mobile on a web page and it just won't let you do this. This means that pinch to zoom has been disabled, which is actually an extremely common mobile accessibility issue. So when I'm speaking to customers on demonstrations and I'm showing them issues within the platform, that is often the main accessibility issue that I'm finding for a lot of businesses. And what we will do is we'll notify you on whether this has been disabled, and we'll continue to automate this check for you. This is often something that designers work on, but aren't always aware that it's actually an issue. And then number two, two-dimensional scrolling. So is it required? So again, a very common mistake is a lot of businesses will have web pages that are of a large size and therefore will need two-dimensional scrolling enabled. And this is where you scroll upwards and scroll sideways to view all aspects of the page correctly. And so again, we will notify you on whether this action needs to be taken on your site for mobile users. And this is, again, a check that often gets overlooked. And then leads me on to my last slide here. We'd love to help, absolutely. If anybody on this call wants to find out if pinch to zoom has been disabled, or if anybody wants to find out if they require two-dimensional scrolling, or just wants to know how accessible their website is in general, what we will do is we'll sort out a call. I mean, Graziella has just popped in a poll there. So, if you do get back to us on there, we'll arrange a call as soon as possible, probably tomorrow, and we'll organize that call as soon as. And what I'll do is I'll scan your domain, I'll get into the actual Monsido platform, and I'll tell you if your mobile website is accessible, pinch to zoom, two-dimensional scrolling, and if your website is accessible in general.
I could also imagine all the documents and the PDFs that you want always to zoom in, scroll left and right. This is extremely frustrating for me as a user sometimes when I open a PDF and it's so tiny and I want to zoom in, but it does not allow me. So I believe that Monsido Scan can also catch all those documents as well.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we will leave the poll for a while.
Yeah, let's just leave it open while we hop into Q&A, because I know sometimes people need a while to read through the different options, right?
Yeah, we have, as I told you in the very beginning, we will share both the recording with the captions edited and with this slide deck. And here on the slide deck, you have resources, free resources from us to help you out on your accessibility learning or on your accessibility optimization journey. Something that a fun fact, we are advocating a lot for our color contrast checker. And the other day I was asking our designer here, hey, I made this combination of colors. Is it accessible? And he's like, oh, let's check it out. And this is something that I found out that he's using on a daily basis. He's using our color contrast checker to check if actually the combination of colors is accessible or not. But yeah, you'll see all those resources on the slide deck. Let's move into the Q&A. What do we have? I can't really see the chat, so Jasmine,
Oh,
I'll
I'll
help.
help you out, Graziella. Well, we've actually got a really great question here, and it's about how would mobile accessibility improve SEO? And I'd be happy to touch on that. And then James, you can jump in if you want to. But mobile accessibility, improving accessibility and SEO are really like, we always say, they're like peas and carrots, because a lot of good SEO principles are also good accessibility principles. So making sure that you have proper headings, etc. And then and another example of that is, of course, the alt text, which I mentioned earlier. Making sure that you have good alt text is also good SEO practice. In addition to this, Google's had this mobile first point of view, or mobile get-in, right, for quite a while. So making sure that you're optimizing your mobile user experience is incredibly important for search rankings. And mobile accessibility is most likely also one of those things, because as James mentioned, in Google Lighthouse now, accessibility is one of those items that they're scoring you on. So all of these little factors really do add up to both improving your search ranking from the mobile point of view as well as the accessibility point of view. James, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
No, nothing at all. You nailed it.
I remember one of the statistics about bounce rate on mobile. So if your website is not keeping your mobile, the bounce rate is extreme. It's like above 70% of users who are experiencing a bad mobile experience will leave your page and will never come back. So thinking that a lot of users are firstly getting in touch with your website on mobile, and then they will go to desktop. If they have a bad experience on mobile, they might never even go and open your desktop version of it.
That's a really good point, Graziella. I know I definitely do that all the time. So you guys
Right?
might be losing out on me as a customer.
Right.
Awesome. The next question that we have is it, or I guess it's, automated tools only solve like 20 or 30% of accessibility issues? I guess you're wondering if this is true or not. I would say yes, automated tools, the important thing I would say is we're not solving the issues. We're helping you identify the issues and errors, and then so that you can proactively go in and fix them. And yes, there's not the ability to search for all errors. For example, we can tell you if an image does not have an alt text on it, but if the image is of my colleague James, I can't tell you if someone else went in and put the alt text image of Graziella, right? So there's also those manual checks. James, do you have anything else that you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I can definitely elaborate on that. I mean, totally understand your point there. Whoever put that in, cheers. I mean, on that, basically with accessibility and with automated tools, there is certain things there within accessibility, within WCAG checks that, of course, are visual, right? So maybe something that aligns with text color contrast or link text color contrast and so on and so forth. They, of course, are a little bit more visual, right? So those type of checks, yes, you do need to just cast your own eye over. But the absolute errors like header problems and anything like bold element being added to your website that shouldn't be added because that's a problem for somebody who's blind and uses a screen reader. Those are the type of things that we can really drill down into, and we can pinpoint those problems exactly where they sit on the page. But of course, I do get your point there, and what you're probably trying to say, I believe, is that yeah, there will be some sort of visual checks that you need to make, which is absolutely correct within WCAG guidelines.
Definitely.
Perfect. And I think we'll do one more quick question, but otherwise we'll wrap it up. But I see a couple other questions, and we'll make sure to follow up with you afterwards. But the last question that we'll address live is, I have trouble conveying to colleagues the importance of ensuring their content is accessible. Unfortunately, senior management aren't marketing savvy, so they don't always understand. Do you have any advice on how to highlight the importance of this? And James, I'm sure you have plenty of reasons or suggestions there, so I'll let you kick it off and then I can wrap it up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, there's many ways you can do this, really. I don't want to sell the Monsido platform too much here on this call, but I mean, we do have something in there. It's called labeling. It's basically like tagging people within a post or within a check. And you can actually tag somebody. So for example, somebody's a bit more of a front-end developer in your team, or somebody's a bit more of a visual designer, or somebody in marketing, for example, who you're trying to really show those issues to. You can actually tag them in certain checks, and they'll be they'll be assigned those specific checks. They can come into the platform and they can check those specific checks that have been assigned to those people. That's the best way I would recommend doing it. Unfortunately, I can't really get into it too much with the business that you obviously work for there, but our platform could definitely help with that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point.
Errors.
Sorry, what did you say?
Typical salesperson, right?
Well, I was going to say, it's actually a really good point, because once you link it or label it to someone, we also have our in-tool help that explains the error to them. And like you're experiencing, probably a lot of the times that people don't care about accessibility is because they don't understand it. I think other than that, if you're going to senior management and trying to convince them, I think getting their buy-in is, of course, incredibly important. So really making sure that you're doing some kind of accessibility workshop or having someone external come in and explain, seeing if you have a customer who is, for example, an individual who is blind, and having them come in and talk about how poor your website experience is for them. I know one of our colleagues, he is himself a blind individual, and he does not like shopping for gifts online because it's often such a terrible e-commerce experience for him. And I'm sure that is something that your senior management can understand, because he often goes to another website if he does not find it accessible to begin with. And with that, we'll wrap it up. I think we're a little bit over time.
We're a bit over time, and thank you all for joining us today. I hope you learned something. If you are keen to learn even more, sign up for our newsletter. We will continue having webinars on such topics and similar topics. Something that I think you will be interested for you is more of like some marketing related, like why your conversions are also affected by being inaccessible, why your websites can get even more engagement rate if you are working on your accessibility. So thank you all for joining us today. We're gonna send you all the details about our contacts, but you can also link with us on LinkedIn. Enjoy your afternoon.
Bye, thank you.
Cheers, thank you.